DevOps people, welcome to Full Stack Live. I'm Jochen, the Monospace mentor. This is my Office Hour live stream. If you're not familiar with my Office Hour, it's the live stream that takes me the least preparation and it's the most fun. Yes, Exegete, you can get branded gear from Monospace Mentor. Yes, so Office Hour means you ask, I answer. Go to qa.monospacementor.com, post your questions there. I can get them on screen and we'll do my best to answer them. It can be all kinds of questions. It can be a question about Linux system administration, about software engineering in general, or Ruby coding in particular, because that's my specialty. It can be a career question. Anything that's related to IT is great. And yeah, if it doesn't take too much research or too much effort in teasing apart all the elements. If it's a very complex question, I might not be able to answer it on this stream, but I might actually park it for next week or something. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is if you sign up for a membership on the server room, our DevOps practice community, you can actually post even complex questions on the forum when I post the announcement for the next Office Hour. And given enough preparation time, I'll actually tackle something more complex on this stream as well, and even with priority. So you'll have priority over the people that post questions in chat. That's definitely an opportunity. Of course, the community has a lot more perks, so check out the serverroom.sh to find out more about it. I think, Exegete, you are confusing the co-working bot. I see. No, you're not confusing it, but that's a feature that I haven't seen yet, actually. Okay, we'll have to look into that. Interesting. The reason why I am using the QA platform on qa.monospacementor.com is it makes it easier for me to highlight the question that I'm answering right now, so people who are just joining the channel know the context. And it's also an equalizer between the people watching on Twitch and the people watching on YouTube. It makes things easier to maintain, and the Q&A platform doesn't require any login or user account or anything. You can just go on there and post your question anonymously, so it's no hassle at all. All right, the command you were looking for, Exegete, is, I think, Office Hour, or yeah, it's Office Hour. And I'll look into the ask feature of the super sweet bot. That looks fun. I hadn't discovered that yet. So yeah, qa.monospacementor.com is where it's at. And that's what I meant with the stream, where I don't have to prepare anything, because it'll all depend on you, your questions that you ask, and what I can make out of them. So yeah. And we do have a first question on the board. Have you looked into running WebAssembly on the server? Thoughts? I haven't looked into WebAssembly yet, to be honest, but I think, yeah, I should close that gap in my knowledge. What's the What's the main advantage of the whole WebAssembly thing? I think until a few more questions come in, I'll simply go and research that, actually. Why not? WebAssembly. Enabling deployment on the web for client and server applications. That was the question that I was just formulating in my head. Is WebAssembly the new Java in the browser? And yeah, so basically we use the browser as our thin client. However, is it a thin client? It runs the VM on the client side, doesn't it? So you're actually downloading the application to your browser, and then the application runs in your browser. I guess applications can still have a server-side component to them, can't they? Outside the browser, game distribution. Inside, image, video editing, games, music applications. Yeah, I guess basically everything. Why would it be limited in any way? Apart from the sandboxing that's going on. Okay, that sounds interesting on a technical level. Are there practical applications out there that would be a convincing use case? A convincing case study? I wonder. Interesting question. So, no, obviously I haven't looked into running Wasm at all. Let alone on the server. So we'll have to look into that another time. Here's a bigger question. At least it's a longer one. I currently hold a voucher for Google Cloud exams, and I've chosen to take the Google Cloud Architect Professional Certification. Following this, I plan to pursue the Certified Kubernetes Administrator certification. Okay, that's a valid progression there. As I'm currently working as a senior site reliability engineer, could you provide advice on how to best leverage those certifications for personal growth and skill enhancement? And also, I'm looking for changing the job currently for a year. Okay. Yeah, actually, I'm in the process of writing a blog post about this very topic. And since you are a senior engineer, I think certifications will gradually lose their relevance for you. From my perspective, the value of these certifications basically follow a bell curve. If you are a junior, the value isn't great because the certification doesn't tell a company much about your skills, rather than that you are able to pass exams. But who gets paid to pass exams? So will still have to convince people in an interview or in your application process in general that you have the necessary skills, that you already have dealt with the issue you'd like to get hired for. So certifications don't really help a lot. I don't say they don't help at all, but their weight will be limited for a junior. Once you're getting more seniority, then certifications can be a nice complement to the stuff that you've already done, to your experience, to the skills that you've acquired and demonstrated. So that's definitely helpful there. That's where you climb the bell curve. And once you get more into a mature senior position, then certifications again alone don't tell people much. And since you already have experience and a lot of practical work under your belt, I don't think you will rely much on certifications anymore. You need to rely on your practical experience and the actual value that you can create for your future employer. So what can you do with these certifications? Well, one thing that I'm going to highlight in my blog post is those certifications might actually reveal gaps in your knowledge. Because when you prepare for these certifications, you usually use mock exams and similar things. And going through these exams, you might realize, oh, that's a topic that I've never really paid attention to, just like me with WebAssembly earlier. Realizing that this is somehow part of the certification tells you it's a gap that you might want to close simply to be able to tell people, yeah, I've dealt with that too. And those certifications can be a good map for topics where you need to put in more work or where you may want to specialize, for example, and that's valuable, I think. So that would be my answer. To best leverage these certifications for personal growth is take them as a map and find the blind spots on it, where you still can put in some study work and some experimenting to close these gaps. I hope that helped a little bit. This is my little friend, Coffee. If you just joined, this is my office hour. I'm Jochen, the Monospace mentor. I do teaching and courses and workshops and community building. And during my office hour, I answer your questions. Post them to qa.monospacementor.com, where I'll pick them up and try to answer them. Actually posted in chat to our discussion earlier about WebAssembly. Blazor in .NET compiles C# to WebAssembly, then runs in the browser. Yeah, I don't doubt that there is tooling, but is there an application, a WebAssembly application, that you would say, try this and you'll finally see the real value of WebAssembly? Is there a killer application for WASM that tells me I definitely need to put time into this topic? Oh, Figma and Photoshop in the browser are WebAssembly projects. Okay. I concede those are definitely convincing applications of the technology. Interesting. Master Runcia asked, have you heard about K9s? No, I haven't actually. What's K9s? I mean, we have a question that asks, show me your Kubernetes setup. Interested tools and tricks? I don't have any setup at the moment that I can show off. I will have in a few weeks' time, because I'm going to try and create a new design for my company's hosting platform, and we'll definitely dabble with Kubernetes on that. And that's going to run on my home server here next to my desk, where I can run VMs and containers as much as I like. And I'll definitely be happy to show that off once it's set up. Other than that, the only Kubernetes setup that I have at the moment is the one that runs my company's websites, and that is unfortunately a very boring managed Kubernetes setup that we got from DigitalOcean, so there's not much to see there. And since we are only hosting static websites on that cluster, there's also not any tooling worth speaking about. Oh, K9s is LazyGit for Kubernetes. Is it from the same author? Because that same author seems to be creating a lot of these TUI applications. Is it derailed? It doesn't really ring a bell. Let me see. Who's derailed and what have they done? Cilium. Oh, okay. No, I think I know derailed from Kubernetes related projects. The author of LazyGit is someone else, but they do have something else besides LazyGit as well. I just don't remember what it is. If you want to look that up for me, please do. K9s, Kubernetes CLI to manage your clusters in style. Ah, yes, I think I've seen that before, where you can actually browse your namespaces and see which containers are running on which pods and stuff like that. That's definitely helpful. I'll definitely try that out when I set up my Kubernetes cluster here on my home lab. Which means we'll have a nice mix of K3s, K8s, and K9s, all the numbers. Shelling into a container, yeah, I guess it's a fast way to navigate to a container and open and to basically exec a shell on a specific container. Using kubectl for that is pretty time consuming. Navigating which namespace is it, which of the deployments am I concerned about, what are the pods related to this deployment, and then identifying a container and running the actual shell. Having a tool like K9s or something graphical is definitely helpful and much more efficient. I do love the command line. For example, I never really got deeply into LazyGit. I use it for some quick things because pressing C is easier than entering GC in my shell. It's 50% less characters, actually. But just the other day, a colleague asked me how to do a rebase in LazyGit, and I did not know because I've never done one in LazyGit. I still rely on the good old CLI, the good old shell for that. but I can really see how something like K9s makes handling a bunch of Kubernetes nodes with all their payloads much easier. There is another question. What are the books in your shelf? Well, the books in my shelf are actually various. Let me see. So, just a second. So, up here there are the two books of the Shift Happens project, which is a huge book about keyboards. Because if you haven't noticed, I'm pretty much into keyboards. Then I have a few management and leadership books. First, Break All the Rules, Leadership on the Line, Leading Change. Then two books that deal with the psychology side of things, which is both, and both are great books, Mindset by Carol Dweck and Drive by Dan Pink. And then there's a book that I still have to read, which is Code by Charles Petzold. That's a great book about software in general and building software, and I still need to look into that. And then there's also a great picture book that I have called Core Memory, with great photographs of historic computers and computer components. And down here on the shelf, there's a lot of different stuff. I have a few graphical novels. There's William Gibson's Neuromancer, a whiskey lexicon, a few magazines, and a few comic books. It's a few copies of the same comic book called What Happens in the Data Center ... And I'll give a few of these issues away when I finally get to doing my 12-hour live stream. But yeah, it's various stuff on my shelf here. And most of the stuff that I read nowadays is on my Kindle. I don't usually buy paper books anymore because I want to take them on my trips and to the coffee shop, and so the digital versions are much more convenient for me. Most of these books that you see in the background are books that I bought in the more distant past, or books that were not available in a digital form, like the coffee table book about historical computers. Hope that answers your question. It's getting really warmer outside, and in consequence in here. I feel that wearing a hoodie is maybe a little bit much. I probably need to switch to t-shirts. It's 24 degrees in my office here. And again, if you've just joined, this is my office hour where I answer your questions. All you have to do is post them to qa.monospacementor.com. I'll get them displayed and hopefully answered. By the way, if you see a question that someone else posted that you like, you can even upvote them and get them answered more quickly. Two very interesting questions. We'll be able to talk about those a bit. Let's take this one first. Let's talk about the pros and cons of Kubernetes and utilizing service meshes. Do we feel like abstracting away this complexity is the best way to go long term, or creating a new solution that is more simplified altogether? Or how about old solutions that still have a lot of value? Because that would be my answer. If you've been dealing with me for a while, you've definitely noticed that I'm pretty hyperverse. It took me years to catch on to Docker, and I usually am not among the first to explore a specific technology or even proselytize it. And the whole microservice, service mesh approach has value. I don't doubt that. The question is just for whom. And I think our industry is prone to blindly emulate the biggest examples that we can get hold of, namely Google, Apple, Facebook. And if Facebook runs their mono repo with Mercurial, then we all need to ditch Git and start building mono repos with Mercurial. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that, to be honest, because you can't just apply these same things to a small startup or even to a medium-sized business that have value for a huge organization like Facebook or Google. And yes, Google invented Kubernetes because they needed something like Kubernetes. Question is, do we need something like Kubernetes? Do I need Kubernetes to run a handful of statically generated websites? No, I don't think so. I could just have gotten a droplet from DigitalOcean instead. Probably a 2 GB RAM droplet would have been sufficient. Then rsync my statically generated content up there and check it off. But the reason why I did it using Kubernetes was simply because I wanted to explore Kubernetes and see how deployment works and all these things. And that's why I'm using a completely overkill setup to run a few statically generated websites with a small web server in their container. I would really, really recommend assessing the complexity of your use case with diligence, and then deciding how big the cannon needs to be that you're going to fire at that problem. Because the monolith, for example, can still be a valid approach to setting up an application and working on an application with a whole team. It doesn't need microservices with finely granular assigned permissions and ownerships and all these things. And on the technical side as well, if you can have an application, maybe a front-end application that talks to a back-end API, which then in turn talks to a database. If that's enough, why make things more complicated than they need to be? So do we feel like abstracting away this complexity is the best way to go long term? Yes, if you need this complexity, it is a good way because it separates concerns, it makes things easier to manage. You can apply the divide and conquer principle and all these things. But woe you if the complexity of your solution is much bigger than the complexity of your problem. Wow, we are getting in question after question. Don't forget, you can upvote questions that you like and that you'd like me to prioritize. Otherwise, I'll have the challenge of picking the right next question. Let me see. Here's the next one. Do you feel like technology is overly US-centric? That's also a great angle at which to approach the whole industry. What is the worst and best part of being a technologist in Europe and other non-US countries? To be honest, I haven't thought about this much, so my answer will be pretty preliminary. But what comes to mind is that we seem to have more consumer-friendly legislation, and of course the most prominent being the GDPR when it comes to personally identifiable information and how companies are supposed to handle it. And we seem to be ahead of the US in this regard. That might be the case because we are also generally prone to regulation. And maybe the US is historically a little bit more liberal in that. So there's always a second side of the coin. But yeah, I think the EU in particular being a place where laws can be passed that then have to be applied to all its member countries, pushes things forward. And that might be another weakness in that regard, because in the US, states have a lot of say, and the federal government needs to bring out the big hammers to pass laws that apply everywhere. But I'm not too familiar on that, so I'm moving on shaky ground here. But let's get back to Europe, because that's what I know a little bit more about living here. Technology being US-centric. I guess it's not the technology, is it? It's people. And I do smile regularly when I read posts that have clearly the limitations of perspective from a US perspective. Where you can clearly see, okay, that's a person who's based in the US and doesn't think beyond their continent, and so I don't think it's overly US centric. I don't think so, but I think we need to remind people from time to time that the US is not the whole of the world. On the other hand, I happily adopted the ANSI keyboard layout simply to be able to code more efficiently, because I need the angle brackets and curly braces much more than I need German umlauts. So yeah, so that's definitely something that I happily adopted, even though it's absolutely US-centric. The EUR keyboard layout, by the way, mitigates that problem nicely. It turns the right Alt key to a basically what's the Opt key on macOS, where you can then create all kinds of special characters. Napalm Code says lies. That's very non-American sentiment. Well, in my defense, the question was to answer from a European standpoint, so not sure if you can blame me much for my kind of answer there. Sneaky Donkey says, America is wunderbar. It can be. It can be. Napan quotes, I know. It's all good. All right, so, which one do we pick next? Let me see, here. I am right now a Linux sysadmin looking to move into DevOps engineer. I have made a technical assessment for a DevOps engineer interview. I've already sent it, and I also uploaded it on my GitHub. It is related to Kubernetes, and I'm not sure if it is well done. Do you think that you could review it briefly and give me some advice for improvement? I'll do that if you sign up for a membership on the server room in turn. Deal? The Lemon joining us and says, hello, how is everything? Everything is great, at least speaking for myself. It's Friday, the weekend is near, I'm having fun here, getting lots of questions on my office hour. Again, post your questions to qa.monospacementor.com and I'll do my best to answer them. Master Vencia says, deal. Brilliant. So here's a follow-up that I still have to relate to the previous question. Let's start from the top. If there were programming language wars and only one language could survive, which do you think would win? Which would you want to win? That depends on what kind of war we are fighting. Is it going to be a land war in Asia? Let's try and answer that. Let me think. What would that war look like? I mean, if all languages had to do a battle royale, the language that would survive might be one that can deliver a good compromise on all kinds of language use cases. So it could be a language that is pretty general, not generic, but general, that can be applied to all kinds of use cases, that is very versatile, that is easy to learn, and has lots of support from the general programming community, which means it can only be Ruby, I guess. Just kidding. I think I'm not too far off the mark. I would think in terms of general applicability, it probably would be Python. But this might not actually be the ground on which these languages are fighting. It could also mean that the language wins, that can exploit the weaknesses of other languages best, and sneakily then survive all others. But since languages don't really do, they're not going to do robot wars, are they? So I think it'll come down to Python, probably. The Lemon says C is like a cockroach, and cockroaches surviving for eons. Yeah. That could be too. We have very mature tool chains for C. You can write operating systems in C. You can even write web applications in C if someone forces you at gunpoint. Could be, but Napalm Codes also says even though they say C# all the way selfishly, sadly it's probably going to be Python. Yeah, I do agree. Python has that general applicability that Ruby has too, but it has more prominence in our media and on our social networks. So Python will probably win simply by numbers. Navacode's comments, so security will continue to be a problem during this war. Yes, it will. C might actually survive the war and then succumb to a memory violation shortly after that, and the world will lay barren without any programming language at all. That was a fun question. Oh dear, which one to pick now? Let's see. Oh, the link that you posted was that the thing that you wanted me to take a look at? Okay, I'll save that for later. Or you can simply post it to the server room forum. We could even do a hot seat with you, actually, if you like. But we'll talk about that at another time. Okay, let's see. Is there a question? Yes, there is a question. I recently migrated my mini PC home server to a more powerful NAS/server setup. Now I have a spare mini PC with 4 cores, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabyte NVMe. I could add a 2.5-inch drive for more storage. Do you have any suggestions for what I could do with it? Oh, lots of them, actually. I mean, that's almost a humble workstation, isn't it? Well, it's on the humble side of things with 4 cores. Let me see. The NVMe is also pretty modest with 256, so it's enough as a system drive, but you won't store a lot of things on that. I mean, still, depending on what you're going to do with that. What? Yeah, I'm thinking along the same lines as Exegete, actually, who said Proxmox all the things. What this machine could do is complement your more powerful NAS/server setup, which could run on Proxmox. And then you could use your mini PC as a Proxmox backup server, where you can migrate stuff to if you need to take your main home lab server down or something like that. So if your main machine runs Proxmox, there is definitely a way to use your spare mini PC as a Proxmox backup server. It might even work as a Proxmox cluster node. All you'd have to do is add a third machine as a quorum, but as I learned just recently, there's actually a software that can simulate that third quorum member. So you don't actually have to have a third server. You can simply take a Raspberry Pi or something to raise the quorum to 3, because you need odd numbers for that to work. And then you could even have 2 Proxmox cluster nodes. You will probably prefer your main server to run the more complex and more heavyweight payloads, but that's also a possibility. But if you are not inclined to use it as a production machine in that regard, yeah, use it as a backup server as a Proxmox backup server. And as Master Vincia says, hail Proxmox. Here's someone who sighs EC2. Deploying an app is so hard. You have to use Nginx, Route 53, ACM, Docker, load balancer. Any advice on how to deploy an app easily? Yes. Do it old school. And that's actually going to be our upcoming community workshop on the server room in our DevOps community. I'm going to do a workshop for setting up and deploying a statically generated website using Jekyll on a cheap VPS with minimal resources using SSH and Nginx we're going to use Apache as our web server and Certbot to get SSL certificates, and we'll use Git to deploy updates to our website. And the reason why I'm doing this is that I've bought on pretty much to the self-hosting movement. Seeing how service after service that's run by bigger corporations gets enshittified, I realized that we need to enable people to run their own shit. And that includes people who don't have that deep system administration knowledge, that might actually be creators, artists, people who would just want to have a website where they can advertise and maybe sell their stuff. And I'd like to enable people to do either that or enable a third party to provide them with the knowledge to do that. So I think we need many more small businesses who specialize in hosting small stuff, taking care that this artist's website stays online. And that means, first of all, acquiring the necessary skills, and I'm happy to help with that. And second, to keep things simple and easy to manage, and also less error prone. And as you say, if you build these root Goldberg machines with Nginx and Route 53 and ACM and authorization management and Docker and load balancers, not only do they drive up the price, they also drive up the complexity and the number of single points of failure, for example. And so I would encourage everyone to try and take a step back and do something that's old and boring. Deploying using SSH, or as we are going to do it, use SSH to trigger a Git pull to update our website on the server. And maybe even from something like GitHub Actions or GitLab CI. These are technologies that are available to everyone. People can learn them, and ideally our artist actually acquires some modest level of IT skills to be master of their own fate, to not be rug pulled, to not suffer from people fleeing your community platform because suddenly it's flooded with ads. Things like that. I'm following the same path and philosophy, and I'm going to preach that philosophy in the coming years. And I'll also put my efforts where my mouth is by actually offering educational content, courses, workshops to teach people how to do this and how to take their fate in their own hands. If you have if you'd like a more specific answer to your question, simply ask it again with a more specific use case at hand. I'm happy to do that. There's another question. Have you looked at the thruster gem from Basecamp? Might it replace Nginx? I haven't. But seeing gem juxtaposed Nginx, I'm not sure if that is a fair fight, because Nginx is a highly optimized web server with years and years of experience built by brilliant engineers. We run Nginx at scale for our hosting platform. We have Nginx servers that handle millions of web requests per day. So not sure, but I see in chat Exegete it adds that thruster is written in Go. Okay, that might level the playing field a bit. Still, I wouldn't see why I would use that if I have technology available that's pretty mature, like Nginx. Isn't that a little bit an expression of the not invented here syndrome? I'll look into the thruster gem so I don't do it injustice. Let's see. Thruster is a HTTP proxy. Okay, for simple production-ready deployments of Rails application. It runs alongside the Puma web server to provide... Okay. Zero config as possible. Okay. It does definitely follow a different philosophy than other alternative technologies, because if you asked me to recommend a proxy server to you, I would always pick Varnish. I'm actually doing a Varnish course where we take a microscopic look at Varnish in 2 sessions of 3 hours each. The course doesn't have a new date yet. I did the course earlier in April, and I'll do it again later this year. And Varnish is very versatile, and with its Varnish configuration language, which is a subset of C, basically, you can do a lot of stuff. And Thruster seems to aim at a completely different use case, where you don't have to configure much, let alone do actual configuration programming, actual configuration logic. So it might not replace Nginx in general, but it might be a simpler tool that you can apply to a simple use case, where Nginx might fit in, but might be overkill. So, yeah, I think that's probably where it's going to find its niche. For use cases that are simple, where you don't need much configuration, where you simply want to have your humble web server, in this case Puma, serve the actual pages from your Rails application, and then you need a proxy in front, maybe to do some load balancing. Not sure if Thruster can do that, but it might, and do that. And you might not have to deal with the complexities of Nginx in that case. But coming at it from the opposite angle, having Nginx as a more universal tool might also be a great alternative, because you have to learn this tool only once, and then you can apply it to both complex use cases and projects with very low demands. And it's going to be the same software that's what's my experience with Nginx on our hosting platform. I can easily use Nginx to handle millions of web requests per day, including SSL. But I can also use Nginx to simply put a basic HTTP authentication in front of our monitoring system that doesn't have that built in. Nginx is completely over-engineered for that use case to simply ask people for a password, but it does the job, and since I already know Nginx, I can apply it to all kinds of use cases. And Thruster might not be as versatile. It's probably not going to be as versatile, so the investment into learning it might have, let's say, limited effect or not as much return on investment. Only you can decide that for yourself, I guess. Okay. I think this one is also already pretty old. We are at the first office hour. So we are starting into the second office hour here. Happy to do so, as long as you keep asking questions. Here's another fun one. With the advent of AI as one factor, we have always, as an industry, built abstraction on top of abstractions. There are very few good compiler developers in the world, yep, as an example, that work at that level. Do we run a risk of long-term of losing skill sets that technologies are fundamentally underpinned by? What happens when the experts are gone and the compiler needs changes? That question seems to imply that AI provides an easier entry for people into the industry, which is debatable, but let's assume it is. And then these people stay at that level. And I would ask back, why would that be the case? Because people have always entered the industry because they found it easy. Maybe they started programming as a hobby and then made it their profession, even though they had a master's degree in biology or something like that. So somehow we all have started pretty unqualified, haven't we? Who says that someone who entered the industry helped by Copilot will not eventually join the ranks of compiler builders? It's going to be a rare event, sure, but why assume it won't happen at all? Actually, it says, yes, I love this question. One of the core concerns of Asimov in the Foundation trilogy of books. I haven't read Foundation, and I'll be honest, the Apple TV series didn't grab me enough to go past episode 3 or so. So what is the core concern of the Foundation? Is it what's the English word? Is it the concern of succession? Something like that? Let me catch up with chat if there's anything interesting. Sneaky Donkey asked in chat, why use an HTTP reverse proxy? TLS termination, load balancing, caching. The answer is yes. You answered your own question. And Thruster terminates SSL and does caching based on return headers. That's, of course, a value add on top of Puma. So you can basically then combine Puma and Thruster and have your Rails application have SSL. I would assume Thruster also does the Let's Encrypt renewals and all these things, similar to Caddy or something. And so, yes, it's going to be an easy way to solve that problem, to get a Rails application up in 2024. You could do the same with, say, Nginx and Certbot, for example, but then again, you have two applications that need to cooperate and need to be configured and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I see where Thruster will carve out its niche. Exegete said, the core concern is that because the Empire's machinery has worked well for so long, for, I guess, centuries or even millennia, they have forgotten how it works. Yeah, millennia then. And thus the ability to innovate on that technology does not exist. Yeah, okay, I see where this is hitting at the same points as this question. So, it's a valid concern. It's probably a concern we should already have. I don't think that AI changes the landscape enough to make this more of a problem. And that is a very the answer needs to be very complex. That will definitely I won't be able to get an all-encompassing answer here, because there are so many aspects that we as a community or as an industry need to solve. Some of them are social issues. How do we, for example, continue to increase diversity in our community? How do we make sure that people stay in our industry and not leave for a job in carpentry before they can even reach a level where they would design new compilers? So this is a very interesting question, but a very wide-ranging question as well. That's something that I'd like to keep thinking about and maybe write one of my mentor monologues about. If you're not familiar with that term, the mentor monologue is my column in my weekly newsletter, where I pick a specific topic and write something from my own perspective and experience. And that's something, this question is something that I'd like to ponder and maybe write a monologue about myself. Thanks for that question. It's very insightful. So here we have something, part 2. So the test case is, I want to deploy a Django app to showcase my skills. Valid. Here's the app. Could you please say again how you could help, as I didn't hear that part? Depends on what help you need, but since that is going to require a bit of my time and first of all to analyze it and then to come up with an answer or with some helpful advice that you can apply. I can't do that just for free, and so that's why I asked if that I can do that in turn of people joining the community, the server room, because in this whole community concept, I've actually integrated putting in my own time for answering questions, for going deeper on a specific issue or challenge, And so the server room, being a membership community where I need to have a subscription, gives me the space to create some additional value for you there, which I can't do otherwise running two businesses in parallel. So if you are inclined to join the server room, please do so. Post your question there with your link and let me know what you would like me to assess or what help you would need with that. And I and maybe even other community members will be happy to do that. Whew, people, you are keeping me on my toes. And if you keep asking, I need to grab myself a bottle of water. But let's, to be honest, I could go for another 15 minutes or so, but then I'll definitely need to hydrate. So why not simply take a short break? I'll grab a bottle of water. And then I'll be back. Maybe we'll have a few more questions on the screen there as well. We'll see. So let me grab that bottle of water quickly and I'll be back. And in the meantime, I'll simply run an ad so people don't get pre-roll ads when they join the channel. Okay, see you soon. Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks for the hint, Sneaky Donkey. I said, here we are, back again. Thanks for your patience. The Lemon said, you are not going home today. Well, keep the questions coming and I might not leave, actually. Master Vinci asks, what is the thing you have around your keyboard? The thing I have around my keyboard? I'm not sure what you mean, because I think you mean the keyboard. It is part of the keyboard. It even has a handle. It's actually not about portability, it's simply because my wife keeps saying I need to get a handle on things, so I did. All right. So, Loman says, you have changed the tiers and reduced the price. Great move. Yeah, I finally saw the light thanks to a few community members who pushed me, who nudged me in the right direction. And I think, yeah, the whole community model is much more sensible right now. And I hope to see you all soon signing up to the serverroom.sh. Okay, let's get back to our questions. Let's see. This one was, I think, the earlier question. Theoretical scenario. A company wants to move away from AWS. How can they contact you? And what solutions would you recommend for a scalable AI app? They can contact me at hello@monospacementor.com, or you could simply use the contact form on monospacementor.com too. That's easy. What solutions would you recommend for a scalable AI app? That's a very general question that it's hard to answer specifically. That might be something that we can discuss on our Discord, which is open for everyone. Because I think answering this question will require a lot of back and forth of getting more detailed in terms of what we need to do, or solutions can mean all kinds of stuff. As you mentioned, moving away from AWS, we will probably have to talk about infrastructure. So solutions could mean infrastructure for a scalable AI app. It could also mean different things, so I'm not sure how to answer that question properly without going in a completely wrong direction. I mean, there are definitely some alternatives to AWS that come to mind. It could be on-premise, which might be a challenge if we're talking about AI, which means lots of AI hardware, which means lots of cooling required. So maybe running it on-premise might not be an option, but there are also alternatives to AWS that don't command as high prices as AWS does. So while I can't answer that question more specifically without more details, there are definitely going to be alternatives that you can take and research. Here's a question with a follow-up, but still I need to hydrate. I feel parched. Oh dear. Okay. I've been trying to learn keyboard with success with the letters. However, I'm having trouble with modifiers, as I'm not sure how I'm supposed to use combinations such as Control-Shift, Control-Alt, etc. It seems like the places I used to learn does not teach that. So I'm guessing you mean touch typing without looking at the keyboard all the time. There are I'm not sure if the common typing tutors like monkeytype.com or something also cover modifiers. They do, I think, cover capitalized letters, but probably not modifiers. But on the other hand, you don't really type text using modifiers constantly other than shift. So I would say that's more of a matter of practice. And then, of course, it also depends on your keyboard layout. For example, I have a bit of a different keyboard layout, even on my one-piece, my monolithic keyboards, if we're not talking about split keyboards. And I'll show you. Almost all of my keyboards have the Happy Hacking keyboard layout, which means two main differences. The main difference being the split backspace. As you can see in the upper right, there is no backspace key, no big backspace key, at least there isn't. Instead, I have two keys in that place, which is the backslash key and the tilde key. And the backspace key is actually one row down, where usually on an ANSI keyboard the backspace is. Which means for me, the backspace key, which I need very often, is much easier to reach with my pinky. And in the upper right, I have two keys that I don't really need that often. And then the other difference is it's a 60% keyboard. It doesn't, for example, have any function keys, except it has this function key down here that then switches to a different layer where the number keys, for example, become the function keys. And with this Happy Hacking keyboard layout, I make things a lot easier for me. And then there's another difference, and that is that the control key is where the caps lock key usually is. Which means this is also making it much easier for me to type Control C and all the other command combinations. And this Saturn 60 that I'm using right now has the exact same layout too. So it really depends on the keyboard layout that you're using.
It's a Unix system. I know this.
It is a Unix system, and it's Manly Mutt following the channel. Thank you very much, and welcome to the stack. So yeah, I would say simply practice keeping your fingers on the home row, which is the ASDF and JKL semicolon keys, and typing from there. Try to improve your touch typing, and then use the two shift keys as they are meant to be used. So use the right shift key with the left half of the keyboard and vice versa. Maybe put control to a more convenient position if your operating system or your keyboard allows that, and then simply use that. And when it comes to modifiers, simply use the fingers that make the most sense. For example, use your thumbs for the modifiers left and right to your spacebar. Yeah, or use your pinkies with the outermost modifiers. other than that, I don't think you'll find a typing trainer application that actually teaches you using modifiers. I've never seen one, at least. Manlimat saying, hello, awesome keyboard, didn't know they made them like that. Yeah, the keyboard layout that I've applied to all my custom keyboards here is the so-called Happy Hacking keyboard layout, because, yeah, there is an actual Happy Hacking keyboard built by Fujitsu that introduced this layout. It was a Japanese professor who designed that layout as a modification, of course, of the common ANSI layout. And the Happy Hacking keyboard, of course, as the name implies, was meant for programmers and system people, and it pretty much is. It also has, at least the previous generations of it have a great rubber-based key switches, the so-called Topra switches, which have, in my from my perspective, have a great key feel and a great typing feel. It's definitely worth a try. And of course, I have a an original Happy Hacking keyboard myself. Basic Panther says, yeah, keyboard layouts are all personal preference. There's many different styles. Practice makes perfect. Yep, I do agree. And of course, yeah, there are many different layouts. For example, I alternately use split keyboards like this one. It's called a corn. And of course, it has a coffee-based color theme and key legends. Keyboards. How to derail my channel? The best way is to ask a question about keyboards. Manimat says, that's so cool. I've been looking at that. I've been into IT and programming since watching War Games when I was 5 years old in '88. Yeah, War Games is definitely one of my most influential movies of all times. Definitely got me deeper into computing. I was already in computing at that time. But guess why I have this blinking lights machine back here. I mean, once you've seen the Whopper, you need to have something like that. And I've also been lusting after a VT100 terminal for years now, but unfortunately they are really hard to get over here in Europe. They are more easy to get in the US, and even there they're now highly sought after and as expensive. And now I actually got to join a group commissioning a great maker in creating a 1:3 scale replica of the VT100 terminal with a flat screen built in that you can actually use as a computer screen, or even as a terminal, because recently they asked about if they should include a 9-pin serial port or a 25-pin serial port, and in my opinion, the 9-pin fits the size much better. So apparently it's going to be a real terminal that you can use with a serial connection, which will be a great complement to the PyDP 11 back here, which is the replica of a mini computer of the 70s. It's an actually working replica that runs PDP-11 code. I can run Research Unix version 6 on that machine, and the VT100 will be a great addition to that set. It'll complete it. I would also take an IMSI 8088 as in war games. And there is actually someone who's building these replicas as well, or selling kits for these replicas, so you can build your own IMSI 8088, which actually was one of the first home computers, but it was just the computer part. I'm not sure if you knew that. These first home computers, like the IMSI 8088 or the Altair 8088, they didn't have any keyboard or monitor. You had to attach a serial terminal to them, just like you did with bigger mini computers in data centers. So the monitor that David Lightman has in war games is actually a terminal monitor that is attached to his home computer via a serial port connection. Okay, let's tackle a few more questions. Would you say the most important skill for DevOps SREs is Linux? Actually, no. I would say the most important skills for anyone in IT are, as I wrote on my blog, analyzing problems, writing documentation, being curious, managing time, and communicating properly. That would be the core skills that anyone in IT should have. And if we're talking about DevOps SRE, yes, of course, those core skills will then lead you to Linux, because let's say curiosity, once you learn that the whole internet is based on Linux, you will probably have enough curiosity to tackle that. And yes, having solid system administration background is definitely something that you need as an SRE. SRE is basically what happens when you apply software engineering principles to system administration. Because many times, at least in the past, system administration meant a lot of manual labor, or toil, as we call it nowadays. And applying a software engineering perspective to that means more automation, more scripted processes and things like that. Also, heavy data collection to create observability. But this data then, of course, also needs to be digested, needs to be turned into something that humans can parse, stuff like that. So Linux is only a part of the whole thing, but let's turn the question around. Can you be a good DevOps engineer or site reliability engineer, or as I also like to call it, service reliability engineer, without being versed in Linux? I'd answer no, you can't. Thoughts on self-driving vehicles? It seems very difficult to create something that runs in many different environments and situations. Yes. And that basically brings us to the general topic of general artificial intelligence, because it's simply amazing what our brain is capable of doing when we sit at the steering wheel of a car. Juggling all these visual, auditory, sensual inputs, and even just the visual inputs alone. You have road markings, you have signs, you have people crossing the street, you have other vehicles, of course. All these things that our brain is able to parse and make decisions in a split second. I don't think we are anywhere near that processing capability in terms of computers and software. Manimet says, I think the advancement in AI will help with this. Yes, they will, of course. Eventually, we'll probably end there, or we'll eventually reach that goal of really self-driving vehicles that can do stuff autonomously. But I think that technology hasn't been cracked yet. Even though we have these machine learning systems now and these large language models, for example, I think this decision making based on sensory inputs on one hand and experience on the other hand, because I mean every one of us who's been driving for a while knows that part of why we drive more securely nowadays is that we had many experiences in the past, maybe near-death experiences, from which we were able to learn. And I can't see any system that exists at this time that would be able to do all these things. I mean, there aren't any really capable self-driving cars around just yet. As it turns out, many of the so-called self-driving cars that are driving around California or such are rather like the classical mechanical Turk. That machine that was only able to play chess that well because a very small person was actually sitting inside that cupboard and playing at a grandmaster level. And it's very similar nowadays, where you have people sitting in front of monitors and watching the camera feeds of these cars and intervening before something more serious happens. Again, post your questions to qa.monospacementor.com. But I think since we are nearing the 2nd hour mark now, I'm going to wrap up things in a short time. Manly Mod asks in chat, did you hear about Amazon Store and AI whistleblower? No, I didn't. But I'm pretty sure I'll read about it on Mastodon soon. That water bottle is already empty. Almost empty. Another sign that it's time to wrap up. Oh, you mean the Lumen redeeming posture check. Thank you. My back is saluting you. Yes, the self-checkout stores that Amazon was running. Yep. I read about that. Okay, there's a final question that I'll answer. What's your thoughts on using only IPv6? Hetzner has cloud servers for very cheap and could connect them using VPN to a primary server for IPv4 access. Yes, and they also, by default, provide you with servers with IPv6 only, and you'll have to pay if you want to have an IPv4 address as well. And so, yeah, I think IPv6 is a very sad story, isn't it? It's been around for decades now, and we still haven't managed to switch to IPv6 properly because there are so many people involved that have that much what is it called? I'm blanking on the English word. help me out. If something is hard to get moving, it's not eternity, it's... Oh, my brain is fried. I can't think of the word. Anyway, there are so many people involved that don't seem to have any inclination of getting IPv6 working. It's the broadband providers and the infrastructure providers, and everyone seems to be kicking the can down the road. And so, yeah, it's sad. I mean, if it was easy, simply connecting everyone with IPv6 by default, and then have the whole internet run on IPv6, then it would be a solved problem. But we seem to be clinging on to IPv4 for our lives, and I don't have a solution either how to get unstuck here. And kludges like using a VPN to a primary server that then proxies stuff via IPv6, yeah, that's definitely possible. Having these IP gateways, basically. But routing-wise, they are, of course, also a nightmare. And also, you're introducing new single points of failure and things like that. So it might be another transitionary tool, but how many of these intermediary things do we want to put in place before we switch to IPv6 proper? Give me a sec, I need to find that word. Now that I want to look it up, I actually remembered it. I was looking for inertia. There's so much inertia at all the different stages of the network, with broadband providers and infrastructure providers, data center providers, and so on and so on. And that is what I was looking for. That's not actually a question, I'd say. It's more of a compliment, and I thank you for that. I think in my case, it's mostly lighting, though. Other than that, yeah, I don't have any tips on teeth hygiene or skincare other than the absolutely normal ones. Brush regularly and have good hygiene habits, but thank you for the compliment. It's really appreciated. All right, folks. I think it's time to wrap up. Let me see. Yeah, so next week there won't be any live coding streams because I'll be off to DevOps Days Berlin. And so I'll be back on Thursday night, which means there's still a good chance that I'm going to do my office hour on Friday afternoon. I might have to sleep in on Friday, but that won't be a danger to the office hour, I don't think. So I guess we'll see each other in a week's time. If you want to ask more complex questions, or rather, I mean, you can ask more complex questions here on stream, but I won't be able to answer them. If you want me to answer more complex questions, then join the serverroom.sh, my community of practice, and you'll have access to our community forum where you can actually ask your complex questions, giving me a little bit of advance notice to prepare an answer to your questions. And then I'll answer them here on stream to everybody's benefit. And if you want, you have now a week to join the community and post your questions. And then I'll be back on Friday next week with another Office Hour. Look after yourselves. Have a great weekend. And until next time, thanks for everything. Take care.